Good evening, Dallas ISD community, and welcome to our district's second webinar conversation, where we will spend the next hour engaging with some distinguished community members who will share their perspectives on racism and racial equity in the Dallas community.
Buenas noches, comunidad de Dallas ISD. Bienvenidos a esta segunda sesión web acerca de cómo evitar el racismo en el distrito y en nuestra comunidad. Si quiere escuchar esta presentación en español, por favor vaya a la parte inferior de su pantalla y pulse en el mundo para comenzar la interpretación en español. Si esto no funciona, por favor deje esa sección y vuelva a intentarlo. Si tiene cualquier problema, por favor, haga una pregunta en el Q&A que se encuentra también en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Gracias.
My name is Sharon Quinn, and I serve as the Deputy Chief of Racial Equity for Dallas ISD. I'd like to recognize and thank our Board of Trustees for being instrumental in creating policy and a resolution that emphasizes the importance and the expectation of racial, socioeconomic, and educational equity across our district. Our board has been very direct and overt in setting their expectation for our district to eliminate systemic and systematic disparities that adversely affect our African American and our English language learners. And to this end, Dallas ISD has partnered with the Cultural Intelligence Center, and we're using their model of CQ to assist us with developing an equity mindset across our district and creating an anti-racist community. Our facilitator this evening is none other than the Dr. Sandra Upton. Dr. Upton is the Vice President of Global Diversity Practice with the Cultural Intelligence Center, and she's responsible for providing leadership and expertise on diversity, equity, and inclusion matters for clients across the globe. She has over 2 decades of experience with training and consulting with businesses, global agencies, educational institutions, and nonprofits. Dr. Upton has led the Cultural Intelligence Center's response to the growing demand for global companies such as Starbucks, Facebook, Global Sachs, Google, Hallmark, and McDonald's. Her work extends to higher learning institutions such as Harvard and Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, and the London School of Economics. Dr. Upton has also led the center's diversity and equity inclusion work in public school systems like Boston Public Schools and Forest Hill Public Schools, Kent ISD, Irving ISD, and then of course our very own Dallas ISD. She serves as the unconscious bias expert for the Cultural Intelligence Center, and she leads their certification programs across the globe. Dr. Upton has facilitated keynotes and trainings in Brazil, in China, in Indonesia, Israel, Singapore, South Africa, and several countries throughout Europe. She and her husband, Robert, are the proud parents of 2 awesome aged college children, Alexis and Devin. Dallas community, please join me in welcoming the most amazing, world-renowned Dr. Sandra Upton.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Quinn. I wonder who that woman is, but thank you so much. And I am just so delighted to be with you this evening and delighted to have a very robust conversation around such an important topic. And for such a time as this, the Cultural Intelligence Center is so grateful for our partnership with the school district. It is not a new partnership. We've been working with the district since 2018, and it's been fascinating to see the evolution of the work that we're doing, and then how we have worked very hard to heighten and take our efforts to a completely new level in these last several months. And so part of that process it includes a lot of different efforts that are taking place right now, but a big part of that process is making sure that leadership is leading the way and making sure that we're having conversations and that we're keeping the community at large abreast of the work that's happening and how important it is, and also encouraging the broader community to play a role in moving us towards becoming a more culturally intelligent and anti-racist school community. And so, as Dr. Quinn mentioned, today is the second of a series of webinars that we have been doing to keep the community informed about the work that we're doing and to hear from some amazing leaders. Just to reiterate some of the things that Dr. Quinn has said, it's been, again, a wonderful thing to see the level of commitment that the district has made to this very important work. It's one thing to talk about it, it's a whole nother thing to demonstrate that commitment, and the district is doing just that. And so I believe many of you, no one is not aware of the history of our country and of our cities, and specifically of the history of the city of Dallas. But the district has acknowledged this from day one. And a few years back, the district took things to a whole nother level back in 2017, to be specific, and created the Racial Equity Office, created an actual racial equity resolution and policy, drawing a very hard line in the sand, acknowledging the history and acknowledging and making a commitment to addressing inequity across the district and across the community. That was back in 2017. Fast forward to today, 2020, and the board once again declared a deep commitment to this work, and very specifically, given what's happening in our national culture and also what's happening in the Dallas community, very specifically identifying efforts to support the Black community and Black students within the district. So again, we are at the Cultural Intelligence Center just very pleased and excited to be partnered with the district. When we think about our time together today, there are a couple of things that we want to accomplish. For the first webinar, we had the privilege of having all of the chiefs across the district join us and not only talk about how important this issue is, but they talk very specifically about the work that's being done to address this issue. And the cumulative effect of that work is just going to be pretty amazing, and it's going to produce the kind of results that we all know we need to see. So the purpose of today's webinar, there are a couple of things that we want to accomplish. For those of you that perhaps did not get a chance to listen in to the first webinar, we just want to be able to reiterate to you the community's or the district's commitment to addressing racial equity. And I just again highlighted sort of the evolution of the commitment over the last couple of years, but we're going to talk a bit more today about that level of commitment. And then I want to make sure that you understand how the district is viewing cultural intelligence as a strategy for addressing racial equity and really moving the district towards becoming an anti-racist school community. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time helping you understand that relationship. And then most importantly, you are going to have the opportunity to hear from some amazing and diverse community leaders today, talk about why this is important and talk about what the district is doing and again, how you can all be a part of this movement. So just as a quick recap, what do we mean by cultural intelligence? So cultural intelligence, as you can see here on the screen, is the capability to function and relate effectively in culturally diverse situations. The key word in this definition is capability, meaning that it is a skill. It is not enough to be, when we look at the issues that we are trying to address, when we're looking at the fact that we are trying to close equity gaps and address racism and racist systems, it's not enough for people to just be sensitive to cultural differences or sensitive to what's going on or be aware of what's going on, but they need skills. Right? At the end of the day, we want people to develop the skills that are necessary so that the behaviors that we need happen. And then ultimately, we see change both at the individual and system level. So part of what we're going to do in this process is develop the skills, develop the capability of teachers and of staff and leaders, as well as students and families, so that they can work effectively together across cultures. In sum, when you look at why CQ at Dallas ISD, you can see here on this screen, the big picture goal is to reduce these inequities, enhance student engagement, and move us towards becoming a more culturally intelligent and anti-racist school community. You can see the CQ framework broken down here, and there are 4 key capabilities that we look at that we know we can measure. These are skills that we can measure, and we know that they predict an individual's ability to work effectively across cultures. So we know, for example, that a teacher that has high cultural intelligence, the skill, we know that it predicts their ability to teach effectively when teaching students from different cultural backgrounds. Whether that's race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, you can add any diversity characteristic to that definition. So when you look here on the screen here, CQ is an appropriate solution for this work. One, it's research-based, but has practical application. And so we are taking the entire Dallas ISD community through some intensive training around cultural intelligence and unconscious bias. Again, we know it's a capability, it's a skill. So as we develop that skill, it's going to enhance the capability of teachers and staff to work with diverse students and families. We know that we can measure the work, and that's really an important part of this. So it won't just be doing work for the sake of doing work. It won't be just focused on activity, but it's focused on meaningful efforts that we are able to measure and build in some accountability. And we know that there are many strategies and best practices that we will be able to build into this process to move the district towards becoming an anti-racist school community. And we know that cultural intelligence can be improved. So even as we are training staff and teachers, even if there are some who need development, the good news about cultural intelligence is that it is malleable, that they don't have to be stuck. And so there's opportunity for people to grow and to get better. And then again, certainly an opportunity for us to look at the systems and policies and practices that's just as important as that individual growth. So that gives you a high level overview of what we mean when we talk about cultural intelligence and what we mean when we talk about it being a strategy and a viable solution to address inequity within the school community. So now I am excited to transition and introduce you to our amazing team of panelists. And I'm going to be asking them a series of questions that will give all of us insight around their perspective on what's happening across the Dallas community, within the Dallas ISD school district, and what their thoughts and recommendations are as we look to continue to move forward. So I'm going to just very quickly introduce each of them, and then we're going to jump right into the Q&A. So I first want to introduce Amber Sims. She is here as one of the panelists. Amber is a founding member of the Imagining Freedom Institute, a thought leadership institute that works with organizations and institutions to build their capacity for internal and external equity and social justice work using historical analysis and equity frameworks. Amber has worked in private, nonprofit, and public sectors, providing leadership and communications, equity, community partnership, and authentic relationship cultivation and development. Amber is a trusted voice for racial equity and community change. Her methods of change center on the power of proximate leadership, historical context, layered with modern day impact, as well as individual reflection and acknowledgement in tandem with collective people power. Amber has been published in the Washington Post, Dallas Morning News, and Texas Monthly as an opinion columnist on issues such as creating equitable communities for all. So welcome, Amber. So excited that you are here with us today. Another panelist that we have joining us is Shirley Isanusa. Shirley is a retired educator, having served in education for 40 years, 38 of those in the Dallas Independent School District in Dallas, Texas. She served as a principal and in various central administration positions, retiring as an area superintendent. During her tenure, she served as many first high school dean of instruction, first DISD chief of staff, and many others. She was known as a principle maker and a program developer, which included being on the team to develop DISD world-class Town View magnet programs, the DISD learning centers, and many others having developed as her last major project the Barack Obama Male Leadership Academy, the first all-male public school in the entire state of Texas. Known as a strong advocate for students, she was tagged as the raised hands in the room, challenging DISD to address the needs of its most vulnerable students. Founder and principal consultant for SIN Leadership Development, Inc., Dr. Newsom, or Ms. Newsom, spends some of her time consulting around the country. She is a graduate of Indiana University, the University of Louisville, and the Ohio State University. A mother and grandmother, she is also a life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. She is a recipient of numerous awards, accolades, featured in articles, and is known as a strong voice for equity, fairness, and justice. I also want to introduce, so thank you so much, Ms. Newsom, and very glad that you are here today. Renato de los Santos has worked for over 35 years in supporting the aspirations of middle and high school students who are determined to succeed at college or university of their choice. His path began by earning a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology from St. Mary's University of San Antonio in 1980. He went on to earn a Master of Science degree in counseling from Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi in 1990. As LNESC Dallas Director, he directly oversees the implementation of several educational programs, including 2 federally funded Upward Bound Trio projects, a middle school STEM career awareness program in Arlington, Texas, as well as several student leadership and citizenship preparation programs at area high schools and post-secondary institutions. Born in Brownsville, Texas, he grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas, and since 2001 lives in Dallas, in the Dallas area with his partner, Hector. Miguel Solis. Since 2009, Dallas ISD trustee Miguel Solis has served the residents of Dallas in the areas of education, housing, and transportation. He began his professional career as a member of President Barack Obama's victorious 2008 campaign, and soon after was selected as a Teach for America Corps member in Dallas, Texas, where he taught 8th grade school social studies in the Dallas public schools. Solis would later serve as special assistant to the superintendent of the school system, and in 2013, he was elected to the Dallas ISD Board of Trustees. During his tenure, he has also been elected by his colleagues as the board president and vice president. Last but not least, we are privileged to have the Honorable Mavis Knight. She is with the Texas Higher Education Initiative and former board treasurer. She was elected to the Texas State Board of Education in November of 2002 and re-elected in 2004, 2008, and 2012. She retired from the board in 2014. She has served as secretary of the State Board of Education and as vice chair of the board's Committee on School Initiatives. Mavis has extensive experience in community support efforts with more than 30 years of volunteer service working with civic and education organizations to provide mentoring and other services to youth, families, and senior citizens. She has served on various Dallas Independent School District advisory committees and was president of the Dallas City Council of the Parent-Teacher Association. She has held various PTA positions at the district, state, and national levels. In recognition of her contributions to education, in 2011, she was an inductee into the African American Educators Hall of Fame. She attended North Carolina Central University, where she earned her Bachelor's of Arts and Master's of Arts degrees, both in psychology, an honor graduate of NCCU, where she has experience administering diagnostic reading tests and prepared study materials for the reading laboratory as a work study student. She also has had work experience as an elementary school instructor, a college psychology instructor, a substitute teacher, test monitor, and social service eligibility specialist working with food stamp program. So we are privileged again to have a very diverse team of panelists that will now have the opportunity to share their perspectives and experiences with the district and giving us insights around how do we move forward. So with that, I am going to begin by asking the first question, and I'd like to start with you.
And then, Ms. Upton,
yes,
just really quick, wanted to thank Trustee Solis, who's just rolling off the board, for his years of service, but also just thank you, Trustee Solis.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Amber. Yes, we are very grateful for the service that you have given to the district, and really excited that you are willing to spend some time with us today, even as you are transitioning off the board. And with that, I'd like to start with you and just have you talk a little bit about how you would describe the current state of racism and racial equity or inequity in Dallas. And this is a part 2 question. So how would you describe the current state of racism and racial equity in Dallas? And then what do you think needs to be done about both?
It's an honor to join you all. Amber, thank you so much. You've been a great friend over the years and have been a mentor for me as I've gone through this process. And just to see the people that are on this panel, literally every single one of them, I've come to know through my service in DISD, and they have in some form or fashion helped frame my thoughts on the way that we do better for our children, and most importantly, do better for our kids who historically, our system, many other systems in this city are down. And so what I would say is, the first, where are we at as it relates to the state of racism and racial equity in DISD? I say that we've made significant progress, but I still think like there are just inherent systems right now that are driving inequity that are quite honestly rooted in either explicit or tacit racism. And when we look at like the data around things like academic achievement for our African-American students, it blows my mind, and it shouldn't, but it blows my mind that year to year, we are still not closing the gap in things like reading and mathematics for African-American students. And you look at that, and then you add on top of that things like the disproportionate impact that our disciplinary practices are still having on our students, especially young Black boys. Something has got to be done to really ameliorate these sins that continue to occur. Now, where we are as far as trying to ameliorate that, I am very encouraged by the progress that has been made. But look, let me stop for a second and give all praise to people like Mavis Knight, to people like Shirley Isanusa, who well before Amber and I were doing any of this work, established a foundation of truth to say that we are not doing right as a system, specifically not doing right by our Black children. And unless we radically think different, we will not be able to close this gap. But the radical thinking has got to start with internalizing some of the things that you're talking about, Ms. Upton, the idea of what are my own biases? What about my history do I know and do I not know? And I thought I was very well, informed on this stuff, even being, Mexican-American growing up in the state of Texas. I thought I'd experienced things that made me an expert when it came to race. And then I learned about the federal redlining patterns. I learned about racial exclusionary zoning in the city of Dallas. I learned about where we placed highways, the communities that ran through. I learned about the fact that in '54, Brown v. Board of Education happened, and then we fought it as a school system for literally another 50 years. And then even after the federal deseg order in 2003 was lifted, we are still a more segregated school system than we've ever been before. There is so much more that we have to do, but we have said in DISD, we acknowledge what happened, and it is on us to ultimately change that. And a lot of that, as I mentioned, started with people like Shirley Isanusa and others who called out that hard truth and got something differently.
Thank you so much, Mr. Solis. And I love your comment about calling out the truth, right? I love what Brian Stevenson talks about. It's like we have to start with telling the truth and reconcile that. Otherwise, it's almost impossible or very challenging to move forward. And so with that, I want to move to Mrs. Isanusa and hear you talk a little bit about, especially given your history and all of the work that you've done to help bring the district and the community to the place that it is today. How how would you describe the current state of racism and racial equity in the city, in the district? You're muted. We want to have you unmute.
Well, good afternoon. Good morning to all. First, let me just say about racism, it is alive and well and kicking. Mm-hmm. It is alive in Dallas. It is alive in these yet to be United States. It is alive in the GISD. Having said that, I do find a silver line of hope in what I see that the board and the district is now doing. And it is I will tell you, it is a thin line. I was here in 1976 when the first court order came down. Prior to that, the district had worked on an anti-racism program in collaboration with the YWCA, which had a national program of anti-racism. It was headed up by Dr. Yvonne Ewell. Then came the court order. And we just go over and over and over. The notion that we must face the truth, we must reconcile our respective truths. Everybody has their own truth. You cannot tell me that the Confederate folk don't believe strongly what they believe. That is their truth. And then there's another truth on the other side. What I am hopeful for is that people will open up to talking so we can reconcile those truths. Mm-hmm. To have one truth and with a focus on the children. If we keep our eyes on the prize, which is the children and their welfare and what's going to happen to them down the road, I don't worry too much about adults. I will tell you that when I was working with the district, I would tell the adults, you all have your degree and you have a job. Our focus has to be on these children and what we can do to make sure they can get to the next level. I want to thank Mr. Solis and other members of the Board of Education for that very profound resolution they put forth. That was unprecedented, not only in Dallas, but in these United States. And so for the leadership to go on record as saying, we acknowledge that we have a serious problem. It has been an ongoing problem, and we challenge the district leadership to do something about it. So I think that is the first step, or the second step. I think the first step is that we have to reconcile what our different truths are. I think the second step is then to, I was just watching 21 Bridges, is to look the devil in the eye. Mm-hmm. Look the devil in the eye and then look in the mirror and say, me too. Mm-hmm. What is it within me? What was I brought up with? Yeah. I'm hopeful a little bit. But I've been around a long time and I've seen this evolution, this cycling. Mm-hmm. And it continues to cycle. And what I will finally say is that to stop the cycle, we must, just put our feet to the ground and hold steady. Hold steady and don't let it pass. We go in these cycles, in education especially. It's phonics this year and it's whole language the next year. You got to plant your feet firmly on the issue that America, as Derek Bell said in his book, in Bottom of the Well, that racism is as much a part of the tapestry of this America as is mother and American pie. And once we can recognize that, then we can do something about it. But the failure to recognize that, we will just keep going in these same cycles over and over again.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Mrs. Knight, your thoughts around where we are today as it relates to the community and the district more specifically.
Where we are today is like traveling back into time. We moved here in 1982, and it was a strong cultural shock for me, having been raised in a city in Durham, North Carolina, that had a very active and progressive political African-American machine. I did not find that in Dallas. What I found in Dallas was a level of sophisticated racism that would hide behind the appearance of having interest in being a racially equal and integrated society. But if you would look at the actions of the leaders at that time, and if you would attend their cocktail parties and listen to the conversations with you and around you, you would see the true colors of racism living well in Dallas, to include the Dallas Independent School District. We lived out of the country for about 5 years. And it was another shock to come back and re-engage in the Dallas Independent School District and discover that we were retreading the same old issues when our children were in the public education system. I think Miguel and Shirley laid out the case very well, but I want to talk about two other things. I want to talk about the staffing patterns in DISD that I consider to be racist. And I would certainly hope that as you are doing your training for current staff members, that those new teachers and staff members who are coming in will actually go through a boot camp before they hit the Dallas Independent School District grounds, so that they will come in having addressed their biases before they even talk to a student or work with their co-workers. It's kind of behind the times when you have to deal with them while they have already been in the position. So you need to deal with those who are already there, but you especially need to deal with those who are about to come into the system so that they can be as free as their biases as possible. The academic achievement issue, it has taken DISD too long to address the issue. And you can look at half-hearted efforts. It was disappointing to me that the African American Student Success Initiative did not get the funding and a placement in its own department without being spread out among individuals who already were overworked and really didn't have time and the resources to devote to making a meaningful commitment to raising student achievement. In the CAP program that you have for reading, I would hope that you would extend it to math, because math and reading are two areas in which our students are not performing to the level that they need to be. And if you can't read, it's really difficult for you to achieve many other things, because comprehension and being able to read is critical to student success. And I probably have run over my 2 minutes, but those are the basic issues.
Sure.
Now I'm gonna get to the board in another segment, even though I appreciate how difficult and what a heavy responsibility being a board member is, having been a former elected official myself. So Miguel, I appreciate the service that you have done, but I'm still gonna talk about the board.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Knight, and just some great insights there. I want to make sure, specific to this question, that I give both Amber and Mr. De Los Santos an opportunity. So why don't we start with you, De Los Santos, if you could share your thoughts about where you see the community and the district as it relates to race and racism. You might want to make sure you're unmuted.
Sorry for that.
There we go.
One of the risks of being on a panel after such great panelists is that a lot of what you were thinking, your thoughts have already been spoken to. So I want to address the issue that we are a large district with a large enrollment of Latinx students, with a large enrollment we have one of the highest percentages at 44% of students who are English language learners. We as a district need to celebrate and be proud of, and a community also celebrate and be proud of these students as well. And the issues that are involved around diversity and equity for these students are also tremendous. I want to Also call attention to some of the results we recently heard from the MAPS tests that were taken. And, you know, this is being taped at a time of the coronavirus emergency. And that has uncovered a lot of inequities that are endemic in our community. And we need to do a better job of addressing that. I'm proud of the district. I'm proud of our community for taking this on, but we cannot take pride in to say that we're aware, but we need to actually deliver for our respective communities. So my thought on where we're at and what we need to do is specifically that we need to coordinate, put aside our differences, and make sure that we work with the best interests of our children. We've also recently just finished an election, which has shown us that not everyone's on board with us. We recently had an executive order from our administration in DC that hampered or caused people to maybe rethink whether their commitment. And I hope that the resounding results of the election, I think, in terms of the administration, will help us move forward as institutions with a renewed commitment towards this work.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And Ms. Sims, certainly want to hear your thoughts in terms of how you view the current state of the community and of the district as it relates to race and racial equity.
Yes, thank you so much. It's, I mean, it is truly an honor, Ms. Knight and Mr. De Los Santos and Ms. Isanusa and Mr. Solis to be on this panel with you all. And I think it's important, right, to bring in history. One of the things Ms. Isanusa brought up the YWCA, which was a stronghold in the Black community. Folks like Frederica Chase Dodd fought to have the YWCA in the Black community. And it was doing anti-racism work right into the 1970s. And one of the things to know is that the YWCA in Dallas stopped doing anti-racism work, disassociated itself from the national chapter, and became Wings. And that, to me, is like a spit in the face, right, to the history of our elders who did that work. And so one of the things that I also say, right, is in Dallas, like, folks have been doing the work. And, you know, kind of what we're seeing now is that the work has been undone. And so we have to be relentless. We have to be steadfast. When you ask me what, you know, Dallas thinks about race and moving forward, I'll have to say, look at the schools that the district has closed. You can't tell me that this district respects history. You mean to tell me that y'all closed the school of Julia Frazier? Do you know who she was to the district? That you closed the school bearing the name of Pearl T. Anderson, right? You know, that we had to wait for Harley to sit empty before we decided what to do with it. And that schools, right, the first Black school that was established, B.F. Durrell, is sitting without a landmark from the district, right? You know, where Frederick Douglass, the school was, like, it's on a highway. And so I think that we have to go back to history. I know that we have to. I was doing some archive work and I saw in 1959, there was a flu pandemic and there were 8 schools that had 20% or higher cases. And guess what? 6 of the 8 schools were Black schools. I point that out to say today that we are seeing the results, right, of what is happening to Black students in this district as a result of COVID. And it has happened before. And so this district has historically been misrepresenting, right? It has historically been disinvesting in Black leadership, Black students. And all we have to do is, like, go into these archives. We need to find these Dallas ISD archives to really be able to tell the stories, but also to really think about what it means to not repeat the sins of the past. And Dallas is a very ahistorical city, right? I grew up here. And we have to be very honest, right, about what this history is. And we also have to be very steadfast in teaching our kids this history as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Sims. And with that, you know, one of the things that we want to be able to leave the audience with, so this is being recorded and it will be made available to the entire Dallas community, not just the school district, but the broader community. And so I think everybody has done a phenomenal job of, and rightly so, laying out the reality of history and also the present day challenges. So there's clearly lots of work that needs to be done. And when you look at what the district has done just in the most recent years, going back to, again, that resolution that was created back in 2017, and then a renewed commitment in 2020, and then the work that we are partnering with the district to do, there is a commitment and effort to move things in the right direction. It won't happen overnight. It won't be easy. It won't be perfect. And it is going to take some time. My experience, as I've worked with numerous schools across the country and globe, I've seen where there's efforts are what I call activity-based versus results-based. And what I'm excited about, given the work that's happening now, again, change is not going to happen overnight, but the work is very much a results-focused effort. So it's all about, again, building the skills of people, teaching the history, understanding the history, but then changing, developing skills so that behaviors can change. And then we can actually monitor and measure the progress, both at the individual and systems level. So I'm really excited about the direction that's taking the district. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And I want to go back to you, Mrs. Isanusa, when you were talking about how you do have you said a thin line, but there is a line of hope that you said that you feel that you do have. And so I'd love to hear you elaborate on where is the hope that you see, and how you see it tied to some of the work that we are aggressively doing right now. But what positive things do you see, and how do you see that having a positive impact on really moving the district in the trajectory that it needs to be moving in?
Yeah, as I said earlier, life has, and especially this district has an ebb and flow of coming to be the best it can be, and then for whatever reason flowing away. So my thin line of hope is that we are in the ebb stage right now. I am the executive director for the Dallas Regional National Alliance of Black School Educators. And after the resolution was passed, we contacted the district to say that we are willing to partner with you in this work to save the children, because ultimately that's what it's about, saving the children.
Yeah.
The district was so my hope comes in that the district was very open to that partnership. The first meeting that we had, we kind of said we won't meet unless the general superintendent is there, because it has to come from the top. The commitment has to come from the top. And not only was the superintendent there, he stayed the whole meeting and engaged with us and his chiefs. So that thin line of hope is that I think I see a commitment from the leadership. Now, what I'm hoping is that commitment from the leadership will find its way down to the classroom. Because if it doesn't happen in the classroom, we might as well just close up the school district and move right on. I think that in many ways, we are more adult-oriented than student-oriented. And so I'm hoping that this new effort will push us back to our raison d'etre, which is the children. Yeah. So that thin line of hope is there. But I do think that this community has to stand and hold these folk accountable, insist on transparency, and raise the hand. They can just call me the raised hand in the room.
Yes.
Raise the hand when things are not going well.
Sure.
Because things have a way of just looking good, we feel good. Mavis said it, whatever, the veneer of things being well, while underneath it is a total mess. Sure. And so my thin hope is that we are beginning to move, we're not there by any stretch of the imagination, beginning to move. And my fervent prayer is that we will stay on that trajectory.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to you, Renato, and have you talk about how, where do you see the silver lining, and what positive things that you see and are you encouraged about as the district continues to try and move in the right direction?
For me, the silver lining is in the fact that we're having this discussion in and of itself. The silver lining is that I encounter people in the business community, people in the greater community who are coming up and talking with me about this very question. How do we see this issue of diversity, of race equity, and ethnic prejudice in this community? How are we dealing with it? And most hopeful of all is, how can we help? So I've seen people, I've encountered people who have come to us and asked for how they can help. And that is, to me, the silver lining. It's not as large. I mean, I wish I could say, oh, we're overwhelmed with a wave of people asking how they can help. But I mean, obviously we're not. But there are people out there who are of goodwill, who are willing to engage. And that, to me, is the silver lining.
That's great. Ms. Sims, Amber, would you share your thoughts around where you see the silver lining in terms of the work that the district is attempting to do?
Absolutely, for sure. We had a summit a few weeks ago, a racial equity summit, and we wanted to do it in advance of the election. And so we had a bunch of Dallas ISD students there. And I mean, they are just so ready to have conversations about race and identity. And they know, right? You know, adults are like hesitant and, you know, we're showing them signs, but the students are ready to have these conversations. We're going to do a debrief after the election and they're ready for that work too. But the students are getting to work. And so we got to get ourselves in formation too. And so, you know, that makes it really good to see, right, students grappling with identity and how to bring their full selves into conversations and how to discuss that. And then, you know, how to show up differently, but also, you know, we're seeing alliances between our Black and our Brown students, which has been fundamental, right, to organizing work in the city in the past, and we know will be fundamental in the future. And so it is those Black and Brown alliances and us really learning more about our identities and our similarities and how we can work together that makes me really hopeful.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ms. Sims. And Mrs. Knight, your thoughts?
Well, Shirley, I'm going to side with you on a slight ray of hope and silver lining. I am encouraged by this racial equity office, but I want to make certain that it has staying power. DISD has had enough studies done over the years that you could pave the streets of Dallas with, that sat on the shelves and gathered dust. And had we really implemented some of those earlier recommendations, we may not be having this discussion right now, because things would have changed so that this conversation would have been unnecessary. So I am cautiously optimistic, watching to see whether this organization and these changes will have enough staying power to make a true difference in what we are seeing with our students and our instructors. If we want to change the way this country is moving forward, we have to raise up a new generation of students with equity in their DNA, because enough older ones of us have not died off and are still raising spawns that are just as racist as they were. So we've got to start with the students from kindergarten on the way through college.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I'm gonna take us to the next question, and I want to start with you, Mrs. Knight, because just a few comments that you just made, I think, are absolutely spot on. And it's this idea that, you know, we all have a responsibility in this work in order for it to work and in order for us to see real sustainable change, you know. And I've heard, you know, a few comments making it very clear that it has to start at the top. So leadership, you know, both at the board level as well as the senior leadership in the district has to be out front leading this work. But then we want to, like you just said, Mrs. Knight, we have to make sure that we are equipping students to have what I would call, you know, you talk about having that equity mindset, but I would say taking that mindset to developing the skills, the cultural intelligence to be able to navigate effectively and to manage their biases towards other culture groups, so that we are preparing them for not only college, but the real multicultural and global world that everybody is going to be a part of. But what else would you say in terms of the broader school community? So obviously we've got teachers, we've got staff, we've got leaders, we've got students, and then we've got families. What are things that other people can do to really be a part of continuing to move the district in the right direction, so that we stay in the ebb and we don't flow down, right? But that we stay in the ebb and we keep that trajectory going upward. What can they do? And even thinking more broadly in terms of the business community and other community leaders, what are some other specific things that other people can do to help move this work forward?
Shirley again hit on the key when she talked about forming partnerships with organizations. The district actually needs to reach out to every corporate entity to find out if they have racial equity programs in their departments, and try and multiply what you are doing by having those corporate entities feedback to you and feedback to their employees how to confront their biases and move beyond those biases. For those individuals, and most send their students to private schools, but for those who are sending them to the public schools, they definitely need to be aware of the biases that they're passing down to their children. And for those who go to some of the most racist people that I know are in private schools. So you need to work with that segment of the population also to try and have a domino effect in leveraging what you are doing so that the entire community is involved. So that would be my suggestion. And along with that, I also need to talk about the patriarchal business community that thinks that they know what needs to be done for students without consulting with the parents and the students in that school system. You cannot, for me, read a book or two and declare yourself an education expert. You may glean some wonderful ideas that you can share with others, but don't set yourself up as the expert and then you are going to make all of the decisions about what needs to be done for the school system, to include manipulation of how board members are elected with your PACs, etc. And you give the appearance that you're being supportive of public education, but what you really want to do is raise automatons who are going to go out and carry your policy issues, ignoring the needs of the different communities within the district. It's like some business leaders become the de facto superintendent for the Dallas Independent School District. That needs to cease.
Thank you so much. Excellent. I love the emphasis on partnerships and holding people accountable is a big part of the work. I see you nodding your head, or saw you nodding your head, Ms. Sims, quite a bit. What are your thoughts about how the broader community can and should play a part in this work?
Yes, I would agree to a lot of the things that Ms. Knight said, Ms. Upton. I also, was thinking about what Dallas ISD does, a lot of other districts do, right? And so we saw the Black Lives Matter resolution that the Dallas ISD trustees did that was replicated in other places, other things like the ACE model. And so making sure, right, that these models that we're exporting are very culturally competent, right? The ACE model is a great place to start because it's a good program, but some elements of it, right, like taking a new group of teachers to a new school and thinking about the biases that they have about this new community that they're moving into isn't something that's currently explored, right? The gaps you know, that come when a teacher comes from a different country, right? To go into South Dallas as an example, right? And the cultural competency that is expected there, and the cultural immersion. And so how we can get the broader community involved is by leading like the district has been doing, but, you know, double checking our work and making sure that it's the best that it can be, right? And that it is the most culturally competent. And something else that I've really been focusing on is how the district, you know, not beyond test scores, right? Because our students are more than test scores and numbers and graduation rate.
Yeah.
Our students are also, right, people who will go into the world. And we also, you know, I worked on the CAP program with Dallas ISD, which I still think about those kids so often. But one of the things, especially for our Black and Brown kids, is their self-identity. And so one of the things that we have to think about is if our Black kids are struggling with reading the most, and I am someone whose aunt, you know, got me them cultural explorer books about Bessie Coleman and, you know, Marcus Garvey and Matthew Perry, and I've read, but I think about what is missing in terms of the personal identity for kids that cannot read and write, right? And the development of that. And so we also want to have kids that have strong inner work, right? And that is so important, because if you believe that you can, right, as a student, students can do anything. But we also, you know, beyond test scores, we have to be very concerned about how our students think about themselves. And I will offer, right, that that's not always offered in classrooms, and that students don't feel confident in their identity. And that has real implications into how they are going to interact with the world and how the world interacts with them by result. And so I also want us to be thinking about that and what we can do in forming student positive self-identity.
Yeah, that's great. And that is so important. You're absolutely right. Mr. De Los Santos, what are your thoughts about what the broader community can do with this work, whether it's students, families, businesses, other community leaders? What do you think?
Sorry about the delay. A lot of what has been already mentioned, I think, is very important. I think we also need to do a better job of the African American and the Mexican American studies courses that are being offered now at our high schools. We need to make sure that not only do we take that curriculum, but extend it down all the way down, I think, all the way to kindergarten and first grade and throughout all the grades. First, in the work that we're doing here, the first challenge is to know yourself, learn about your prejudice, but before you do any of that, you have to know who you are. And those courses go a long way towards helping us understand who we are, especially in relation to the other communities and other individuals that are around us. The other aspect of what we need to do is engage our colleges and universities, especially those institutions that are preparing the teachers for tomorrow. They need to be prepared before they come into a district like Dallas ISD, or really, and we have the privilege of working with districts throughout in Grand Prairie and Arlington and other districts as well. They're facing and confronting many of the same issues that DISD is confronting. So those teachers that are in preparation need to be prepared to be able to deal with the modern society, the modern student, the modern districts, not the district of 1950s. And in many ways, I moved to this area about 25 years ago to do some graduate work at the University of North Texas in Denton. And when I got here, I realized, much as Ms. Knight spoke about how the cultural shock of coming to Dallas and realizing, oh my God, there's a lot of work needs to be done here. Well, that type of experience I experienced that at the University of North Texas, where people came to me and asked me to be part of a lawsuit against the university because of the practices that were going on back then. I did not undertake that, but only because I had undertaken a couple of other lawsuits previous to that down in South Texas. So I'll close by saying we need to be aware that we are part of a state of Texas, that what's going on in Dallas impacts not only our metroplex, but our state, and that what happens around the state also impacts us here. Yes. So there's a lot more I could go on. We don't have the time to speak about that, but we need to be aware of what's happening in other cities and connect with them as well, to learn from their experiences, and also bring to our community what are the best practices that we can find out there.
Excellent, thank you. I like the idea of expanding beyond the Dallas community. Just for the record, I just want others to know that I've not been neglecting Mr. Solis. He actually had to leave our webinar and be at another meeting. And so we were so grateful that he was able to join us and share some of his thoughts at the very beginning of our time together. And I hope that our participants, as well as the listeners, will find his thoughts to be very helpful and insightful. So we are going to wrap up with, I want to ask the same question to Mrs. Isanusa, and this will be our last question. You'll be the last person to comment before I wrap our time up today. But any final thoughts that you have about, how can the broader community be a part of this work so that we really, again, I love how you talked about the ebb and flow, so we can stay in the ebb, right, and keep moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, I think that the district needs to have a litmus test for those in the community to work with us. I had great community partnerships when I was working there, but I would not take everyone on as a partner because some folks want to get inside, to, like Mavis said, to either control the district, to get a hold of the funds of the district, and have little or no interest of the kids. So I think a litmus test is important. And the litmus test is, what are you doing in your arena to foster cultural intelligence, to foster equity? And if you're not doing it in your arena, then you don't need to come into our arena. So I think that's how we have to look at community involvement. And I'm not just saying I'm talking about all communities. Because if you're not doing it at home, you're more likely not going to do it in my house. But I do want to say a couple of things, if I could, very quickly. Sure. The unknown is what is the most frightening thing for folk. And so when we talk about why are folks not doing what they need to do, DISD is more segregated now than it was at the end of '76 when the court order came down. And children see themselves, when we talk about how kids feel about themselves, understand who they are and their identity, they see themselves in the eyes of the adults around them. That's their mirror. So when you have a teacher who doesn't know you and believes all of the stereotypes about Black kids are bad, they're dumb, they need to be in special ed, they need to be expelled, kids are looking at that mirror and see themselves as that. And so we have to begin training folk and make sure that we put the right folk in front of our kids so that when they look in that mirror, they see themselves as kids who can achieve, who will achieve, and I believe you can achieve. My first year teaching, as they always do, they give the first year teachers the lowest performing kids. My kids thought, my kids could have been in, they were very low performing, but they thought they were in the gifted and talented class. And nobody could believe how much they had achieved. So we've got to be very, very clear that if we're serious about children and achieving, if we're serious about this work, we've got to look at who we're putting in front of kids. We've got to make sure that the ethnic study classes are not optional, which they are now, and they are dependent on principals identifying a teacher out of their budget. If we're serious about ethnic studies, then we fund that fully. And yes, we take it all the way down to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, on up. So the kids know who they are and from whence they come. And they also know who their colleagues are and from whence they come. That's the only way we're ever going to solve this issue.
Thank you so much.
The unknown is what is killing us. Yes. And thank you all for the opportunity. And I am going to get my preaching license soon.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I knew starting out that an hour would not be enough time to gather all of the wisdom from this group, and I mean that, but we always have to at some point cut everything off. But I just want to thank you on behalf of, I think I can say this on behalf of Dr. Quinn, the leadership at Dallas ISD, certainly on behalf of the Cultural Intelligence Center. This is who we are, this is what we do, and we are so incredibly grateful and excited, like I said at the beginning, to partner and walk alongside the district in this work. And it just is, just really humbling and very exciting for me to hear directly from those of you who have been in this work for so long and have made such a huge impact, and you're still vested today. So thank you all so much for your time. And we went over a little bit, but I think that's okay because the stuff, it was just too good. And so we thank you very much for your time, and we will continue to keep you engaged and want to keep learning from you as we keep moving the district forward. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us for the second webinar. And for those of you that will be listening in, hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you were excited and got motivated and thought about some things that you can do to contribute to this work, because it will take all of us. And just thank you again for joining in. And we are done. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I learned quite a bit. Thank you so much for contributing your ideas and helping us all to learn as a community about Dallas's past and how we got where we are today. And I really appreciate your time and just your perspective and your experiences. They've meant a lot to me personally. So thanks to each and every one of you.